Hey everyone, welcome back to the Leaving the Shallows podcast. We're so excited for you guys to be here today. Thank you again for tuning in. Today, Heather and I have a special guest. She's a really good friend of mine. Her name is Kristen Hallinan. She's actually been on our podcast before where she was talking about boundaries. And so if you want to hear that episode, it was really good. You can go back and we'll probably put the link in our bio if you guys want to head back to that and hear her talking about boundaries. Kristen has actually recently released a book called Legacy Changer. I have read it. It is amazing. Kristen is an amazing anointed writer. So we know that you will be blessed by reading that book. And it's all about changing our legacy. Just because you grew up a certain way and you saw things happen in your life, in your parents' life, in your grandparents' life, it doesn't mean that those negative things have to continue in your own life. And so Kristen shares a lot of her story in that book and just brings Jesus into it, which I love, Kristen. I love that you constantly in your book, you constantly point people back to Jesus, because there's many books that I feel like they point people to themselves, that they can overcome, they can do it, just like go inward, but you point people upward, which I love that, because that is where the power comes to have our lives radically changed. So you guys can purchase her book on Amazon, I'm sure different stores, right, Kristen?
Yeah, anywhere you buy books.
Yeah, anywhere you buy books. And again, it's called Legacy Changer. So Kristen today is going to be sharing a testimony about her life that the Lord has placed on her heart. And I'm sure that you guys have seen a theme with Heather and I this year where we keep sharing testimonies. And so Heather and I have shared a few of our testimonies already this year. And we wanted to start bringing in other people so that you guys can hear how God is moving in other people's lives, because I think that is so powerful when we hear from other people what God is doing in somebody's life, because a lot of times we see ourselves in those stories. And so we can see, wow, if God did that for them, I know God can do that for me. And I just feel like God is wanting to bring the glory back up to him and to remind people, look at what I can do. Look at what I can do. You don't need to lean on your own strength. Don't stop leaning on your own strength. Everybody else, come back to me. Give me the glory, give me the honor, because I have the power and the ability for you to see the transformation in your life that you want. And so, Heather and I really believe in the power of testimony. And that is kind of a theme, again, that we're going to be having this year. We're going to be having more people on, but today we're starting with Kristen. And so, Kristen, we're super excited to hear what God has laid on your heart to share with our listeners. So why don't you just, before you get into your episode, why don't you give us, just let our listeners know who you are, just a little bit of something about yourself, and then you can jump into your testimony.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be back.
You're welcome.
I just love your ladies' hearts for pointing people continuously back up to Jesus, because I live so much of my life in my own strength, and I was so tired and so sick of it. And that's why in every chapter of the book, no matter if we're talking about brain science or no matter what we're talking about, I just couldn't help but keep pointing people back up to Jesus, because he is the ultimate answer.
Yes.
So you asked me to introduce myself and I didn't do that. I'm sorry.
I
am Kristen. I am a mom of 4. They're ages 6 to 16 right now. So we're just kind of in every stage of parenting. And I've been married to my husband, Sean, for almost 18 years. We like to joke that it's happily for about 14, but that might be generous because marriage is hard.
It is.
Yeah. And we live near Dallas, Texas, and love it. I grew up in California and then Colorado. And when people hear how many times I moved, I think moving to our house we live in now was 26 times. And so people are always like, was your dad in the military or what was going on there? But no, it was parents that were lost, that didn't know Jesus, and continuously searching for happiness or comfort or contentment. And, maybe another house, maybe another city, maybe another job. And so we we never owned a home. We always rented, and we were just constantly up and at 'em. I knew if a family meeting was called, because the only time a family meeting ever got called meant we were moving again.
Mm.
Oh, wow.
So I lived a childhood that was pretty chaotic and dysfunctional, as a result of us moving so often and then just kind of my parents' personalities. We never had friends or got rooted in any communities. So we were pretty kept to our little family, but our
Mm,
house was full of a lot of yelling and screaming and cold shouldering, and
mm,
I became a child that was super hyper vigilant, just always like walking in a room and trying to assess the temperature. Like, is this a good day or is this a bad day? And
Mhm.
what can I do to get ahead of everybody's moods and try to proactively take care of everybody, parents included, so
wow.
that it didn't devolve into a really bad day yet again. So I took those hypervigilance and codependency and all those really bad habits that I learned really like as a means of survival as a child. I took them into adulthood, and I was not being the mom I wanted to be. I wasn't being the wife I wanted to be. I didn't like how I felt inside. And it was after having to ask my mom to leave our house 5 years ago that I decided enough is enough. And it was time for me to really get healing. But I
Mhm,
wanted to share with you today a piece of my testimony that was rooted many, many years before that,
Mhm.
mhm,
and was the whole reason. Um, that or not the whole reason. Jesus is the whole reason, but the primary way that Jesus
Mhm.
used to hook my heart.
mhm,
As a child from about 4th to 7th grade, I had a best friend and would often spend the night at her house on Saturday nights. And her dad was planting a local church in a high school. And so on Sunday mornings, we would get up together and go set up all the chairs and get all the donuts ready and set up everything that was needed for the church. And I had no idea what we were doing. And my parents were like kind of okay that I was doing this church thing with them, but didn't really love it. And so it was kind of an awkward thing when I would come home. My dad was and still is an atheist, and my
Mhm.
mom was raised Catholic, but she wasn't practicing. I never heard the name of Jesus in our house.
mm,
And so I would go to church and I would sit in the back of this high school gym and hear her dad's sermons. And I was so confused. And some part of me is like, is it okay? Is this weird? Like, is it okay to believe the things that he's saying? Or like, I just did not know where to land there because I didn't really understand any of
Mhm.
it. But where Jesus totally grabbed held of my heart was how this family treated me and how I felt in their
Mhm.
home. Like the temperature of their home was so dramatically warmer than
Mm.
my home. And there was laughter and there was an easiness about everybody. Everybody wasn't just always like up and hyper vigilant. And I
Mhm.
even got disciplined in their home a couple times. I remember her mom, in love, of course, but we were playing hide
Mhm.
and go seek, and didn't want to tell on my friend where she was hiding. And her brother said, "Is Melissa in the garage?" And I knew Melissa was in the garage. And I said, "Nope, she's not." And he said, "Do you promise?" And I said, "I promise." And he was a couple years younger than us. And so when it turned out Melissa was very much in the garage, he burst into tears and went to his mom and he said, "She lied to me. She promised, and promises are something that we mean." And I was just wide eyed, did not know how to react because, like, not only were promises not a real thing in my house, but I just saw white lies modeled left and right,
Mm.
really lying for the sake of covering up yourself or getting what you want or looking better. Um, and so I didn't see it as a big deal at all. And no one had ever talked to me about being honest. And so she pulled
mm,
me aside, her mom, and said, "Kristen, your word really means something, and you want people to believe you
Mhm.
and to trust you." And it was the first time that I remember someone talking to me about something moral at all that wasn't in a really shaming, yucky,
Mhm.
manipulative way. And I felt so loved that I just got disciplined like part of their family. And that just stuck with me. I just remember game nights and praying together at the dinner table, and the way that she would tuck us in at night. Everything just felt so different. That fast forward to my college years when I was hurting so badly from all the unhealed wounds I had in my life. My dad left our family when I was a freshman in high school. It was a really long, messy divorce with restraining orders and jail time, and
Wow.
followed by over a decade of not seeing my dad. So I was in a really hurting place and acting out in every way I could
Mhm.
access, and which was a lot at the University of Colorado at Boulder. And so I was just totally out of control and knew that if I kept on this pace in this direction, it was not going to mean good things. And so I needed to do something different, and I had no idea what that was, but I remembered that Melissa's family is the feeling that I wanted to have. It
Mhm.
was what I wanted to emulate. And I remembered that they love
Mhm.
Jesus. And so I took
Mhm.
myself to church. I didn't get invited. No one went with me. But I started going to church all by myself. And that is where Jesus really grabbed a hold of my heart.
Mm. I
Wow.
love
I
that.
think it's crazy that it was a feeling that you had in the family's
Mhm.
house, that that's what led you to think, oh, Jesus.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Maybe it's
Yeah.
Jesus that I need in my life. Because I think a lot of times, like, we think that, well, if I'm not like putting Jesus down somebody's throat
Mhm.
that doesn't know Jesus, how are they going to come to know Jesus?
Right.
Mhm.
But for you, this family just was themselves and just,
Mhm.
and you hear people say that too, like, just love people. People can
Yeah.
see Jesus through your actions. And that is an amazing testimony, Kristen, of that
Mhm.
actually happening for you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
of course you heard them say Jesus, but
It's been a really fun reminder when our kids bring home friends, and I'm kind of
yeah.
like, that seems like a questionable choice in a friend. But immediately I remember I was the
Mhm.
questionable choice in a friend.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Wow.
thank Jesus that this family didn't turn me away, and they
Mhm.
just swooped me in and loved me. And
Mhm.
so sometimes it's hard, but we're trying to do the same in our own house now.
Love that.
Yeah, I mean, that's good for me to know too, because my son's 12, and I'm sure there's going to
Mhm.
be times where and even Elsie, as they get older, they're going to want to bring kids in.
Mhm.
And um, sometimes I may not like them.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's funny. My kids
But
are
we just
grown
don't
now.
know that.
Yeah. But we had those same experiences when kids would come home with them, and I'd be like, "Oh, you're not the best influence." But then I remembered to, we have to love them, like you're saying, because it has such a profound
Yeah.
effect. I had a family that I had the same experience with growing up through high school that took us to church. And, it didn't matter what we did on Saturday, the next Sunday morning, we were going to church. And I think it's so amazing to hear your testimony, because I feel like mine's a little similar in that sense, where I just believe that shows how powerful God is. Those just little seeds that
Mhm.
get planted, they really, that are sown, and
Mhm.
they don't seem like much, but they produce something huge later, and it's so
Yeah.
important.
Well, and
Mhm.
even when I was younger, I mean, I grew up in a Christian home, but
Mhm.
my community when I was younger, all the kids that I hung out with, none of them really took their relationship with Jesus seriously.
Mhm.
They all went to church, but like nobody my age was really pursuing Jesus. And
Mhm.
then we made this move when I was 15 years old to this small little town. It was the town that I actually met Josh at. But the church there was small, but the youth was on fire.
Mm.
And I had never seen people who were kids who were 14, 15, living for Jesus, pursuing Jesus. And my it was actually my sister-in-law, Josh's little sister. She was almost, I think she's almost a year younger than me. I don't remember. Anyways, she's a little bit younger than I am. But I remember one afternoon she was like, sorry guys, I need to go. I need to spend some time with my dad. And
Mm.
I was thinking she meant her earthly father. She didn't. She meant God the Father. And I was
Yeah.
like,
You were like, "What?"
wait, you're 15 and you spend time with God. Like I've only heard at that point of, and now I wanted that and I wanted to spend time with God, but I didn't see it. I didn't see anybody living that out. And so I think all of these stories that we have in your story, Kristen, it's showing the importance of just remembering that people are watching, whether we realize it or not, whether they're Christian, whether they're not Christian, they're watching how we're living out our faith. Because just like I wanted to be around somebody that was the real deal, like somebody that was taking their relationship with Jesus seriously, there's people that are watching us. Like, is this person serious or are they just a Sunday Christian? And how are they living out their lives? And you got to see that, Kristen, in that family.
Yeah. Because people remember so much more of how we make them feel than what we say to them.
Yeah.
And the way that family made me feel, I'll never forget it. And I'll never stop wanting my own home now to feel like that.
Yeah. And I like too that when they corrected you, it didn't turn you away. You were like, oh, they love me because they did it from a good place. So we can stand up for what is right and not be afraid. Like when people come into our homes and just how we're interacting with people, we can stand up for what is right and give correction where needed, and not be afraid that that's necessarily going to turn somebody away, because that is not your memory at all.
Yeah.
So I think that's really cool too.
Yeah, this is reminding me of a story of one of my younger son's friends that I had forgotten about, but it started popping in my mind as you guys are talking. I'm reminiscing in my mind of when my kids were younger. But I remember there was a little kid that used to come over to our house all the time because the parents worked all the time. And he spent a lot of time alone. And they didn't go to church. He wasn't being brought up in anything like that. So I'm probably more like that mom who would be like, here's the boundaries, here's how we're going to act, and here's what we're going to do. But this kid knew we loved him. We took him on all the things that we did. Wow. And we were sitting down one night and we all went to go get like yogurt on like a Friday night. And he came with us and we were all sitting there at the yogurt shop eating. And this little boy said, "This is what a real family's like." And I was shocked and it took me back, and my husband and I were just like, oh my gosh, like we had no idea we were even having that kind of influence. And it's kind of making me wonder, I think that family was just being themselves with you, Kristen. They probably had no idea. I don't know if you've been able to share this story with them, but I hope you have.
Yes. I recently contacted her and let her know. And she said exactly that. She was like, I had no idea what was going on in your house, or that our house was any different than your house. And she was doing exactly that. She was just being herself and loving on us. And we have some kids that come to our house, and I have remembered how I felt getting corrected in love. And so some of these kids that you can tell they're not really getting corrected at home. And so I do the same thing. I try to correct in love and do it as lovingly as possible, and then shower on as much love and affirmation of who they are in Christ. Because I know for me, I wasn't hearing possibility and affirmation of my Christly identity spoken over me. Like in our house, and our kids are caught lying. I am making sure I'm not saying what probably would have been said to me, like, you little liar, you're just a sneak, and you know, things like that. But instead, you are an honest kid, and this is not who God made you to be, and this is not who you are. And speaking those things over them, because it matters so much.
I love that.
Yeah, you just never know what's going on in kids' minds, what they're struggling with, what's going on in their home. My mind just keeps going to like kids my son's age and my daughter's age, and just having them in my house, and what an opportunity that is to show the love of Jesus. And it's not like you said, that they're just being themselves. It's not like we have to put on some kind of show. That like when you love Jesus and you spend time with Jesus, he's going to flow out of you. Like it's just going to happen. I do often pray over my home too, that when people walk in my house, that they feel the presence of Jesus, that they feel his peace, that they just feel at peace in my home. Because we don't know like the eternal consequences of having those, like there's eternal consequences of you going into that family's home, Kristen.
Yeah.
Like if they hadn't have treated you that way, your life could have gone in a different, it could have gone in a different direction. We don't know.
Yeah.
But their impact and their influence in your life had eternal consequences. And so I think that's a really good thing for us to remember, no matter who God brings into our lives. And even for, they maybe even come into our lives for a short period of time, to not underestimate the power of the influence that we can have for their lives and how it can really affect their eternity. And no matter how young they are too, we could have a 5-year-old in our house and they could remember.
Yeah. My therapist likes to remind me stories that start your way don't usually end your way. And I just think that's evidence of God's hands all over my life, because even before I knew him and I loved him and I was trying to be obedient and chase after him, he was there and he was pursuing me. And, one of the things I did in a lot of my healing was story work and digging into what really happened in my story and when did I start believing these lies of shame. But I was so shocked to see that I could just see through the pain, God's hand all over it. And it is so evident that he was with me and that he loved me and that he wanted more for me, and he was protecting me from outcomes that I probably deserved or that should have happened next on the path. But he saved me from them, and I will be forever thankful for that.
Yeah.
I love that you can look back, Kristen, and see the hand of God on your life, because I know like you share a lot of your story in your book, and it can be easy sometimes that the negative of our lives and our past can overshadow or overtake those little bright spots where God did show up. And I think that's what the enemy wants. He often wants those dark spots to cover up the light. But when we look back and we look for the light, I think it's just cool that we can find it, because God is a pursuer of his children. Like he loves us and he pursues us. And but how often do we look back to see? But I wonder though, Kristen, what like with your story, was it sometimes painful to even look back to be able to find some light and Jesus's hand there?
Yeah. I would say even today it can be painful, like painful
Yeah.
in a grieving way, because not having a relationship with my mom or my dad that, you would always dream of, or not having someone there to speak value and love over me and to hear my voice and to want to be involved in my life and want to be involved in my kids' lives. Like there's a lot of loss there. And so the grief is real. And I think until I became a Christian, I didn't know. And actually, honestly, many years into being a Christian, it took me to learn how to lament with God. And it's different than just grieving like the world grieves. Because God wants us to face him with our pain and then be honest about it. And that was the hardest part for me, was being honest about the pain, because I had this view, my earthly father, that if I behaved really good and I didn't get in his way and I wasn't a problem, then I got some more love. And so I put that on our Heavenly Father, and just felt like if I looked good enough, if I wasn't a nuisance, then he would love me more. And so turning towards him with my grief felt like I didn't want to bother him. I didn't want to look like a mess. But once I learned to do that, he is so kind in his response. He's so gentle with us. And it's truly a peace that surpasses all understanding. It was a peace that I hadn't known and I couldn't find anywhere else.
Yeah. I was just thinking how you know how you're saying sometimes you need to look back with God and grieve some things, because with your story you could look back and you could think, oh, why weren't my parents the parents that I needed? But you can look back and say, but thank you, God, that you brought me into a family, that you showed me what a healthy mother and father can be, and they were that for me for a time, and that family had a huge impact on your life. So instead of focusing on like, God, why didn't I have that, you could look at it and be like, but you showed me, you brought me into a healthy family to show me what it could look like. And for that time in your life, you were loved by a healthy mother and a father. And so it's choosing to look at what God did give you, I think, instead of focusing on what we didn't have, but yet still grieving that, like you said, which can be hard to do that.
I think it's so important. I always say, like, in this world, like, you're going to suffer just to suffer. Or when you grab the hand of Jesus, then you're suffering and you get fruit out of it. Like something is exchanged. There's like a supernatural exchange there. And so like when we grieve or we take all these hard things, you know, and grab a hold of the hand of Jesus and let him be the healer. I don't really believe there is healing anywhere else. I believe Jesus supernaturally heals us and then gives us perspective, because we change our lens for his lens in it. Instead of allowing that stuff that we go through to define us, we become defined by him. And then we get to put it in a place where it becomes a place of strength, not our weakness, because then we get to minister to people from that place. You know what I'm saying?
Yes. I love that. So Kristen, if we could just, I just want to finish up with one question for you. What is the one thing that you would want people to walk away with from your testimony that you shared with us today?
I think the one thing that I want so badly for other people is for them to know every ounce of healing, every single step we take towards Jesus matters. Because I think when there's so much pain and it's so overwhelming, or you feel like you're in such a bad spot, it feels like there's too much to do. I'm too far gone. What's the point? This is never going to all be fixed. And the truth is, nothing will ever all be fixed on this side of heaven. But every ounce of healing, every ounce of victory that you take is victory that you've taken away from the enemy. And it is deposits in the kingdom of heaven, which are deposits in your future family.
That's good. I love that.
Well, Kristen, thank you so much for joining us today. I love the title of your book, Legacy Changer. I just love that just encompasses what Jesus does for us, and you know how it starts with us, and then how you're talking about how it's deposited into the generations after us. And I love how God is such a generational God, and how he changes our literal legacy into an eternal inheritance is how I usually look at that. But thank you so much for sharing your story. I actually have not read your book yet, but now that I've heard a little bit about it, I can't wait to order it on Amazon. I think I'll do that when I get off of here. So I hope all our listeners will do the same. And again, it's called Legacy Changer, right? And so I can't wait to read it. And thank you again for coming on and sharing this amazing testimony with us and the power of what God does. No matter what our stories are, he has a way to bring the beauty from the ashes when we allow him to. And that's exactly what you've done. And that's a powerful testimony because it speaks to who Jesus is. And so thanks again. And hey guys, we're so glad that you joined us today. If you have a minute, we would love for you to leave us a review. You can find us on Instagram. You can find us on your favorite podcast app. And you can also find us on YouTube. And we can't wait to see you next time.